This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, citizen-made radio.
Welcome, kia ora, to Emergence News. One of the most obvious signs of the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, their presence among us, their influence increasingly guiding us, is the rapidly growing awareness of Maitreya's priorities. One which is the urgent need to arrest the decline of the health of our planet, our environment. On the 24th of May in New Zealand, and that's not long ago, that's less than 2 weeks ago, here in New Zealand, participating primary, secondary and tertiary students across the country walked off school grounds, protesting and rallying to raise awareness regarding climate change. Mm-hmm. It was a landmark event, really, for children to take this initiative. They joined other students from more than 90 other countries in a global campaign for action on climate change. Now, on that same day, that afternoon, I was listening to the radio, and I won't name the station or the host, but it's a nationwide talkback program. And the afternoon, I listened to the program, not the full program, but I listened for about 50 minutes. And the host on that program labelled our New Zealand students participating in the school strike for climate as truants. And I'll respond to his comments by quoting 16-year-old Sweden's youth activist Greta Thunberg, whose speech to politicians earlier this year. And she says, our political leaders can't seem to think beyond the next election. And that must come to an end. This ongoing inaction of people in power and the companies responsible will in the future no doubt be remembered as a crime against humanity. It's a really powerful statement. But I like this other excerpt from her, and I think this is a good response to this radio host who described her and the thousands of New Zealand students that participated in the school strike. She says, in Europe, I didn't start school striking because I wanted to. She said, I didn't do it because it was fun. I did it because something needs to be done by someone. Mm-hmm. It's so simple, isn't it? Mm. The voice of the youth, they strike a chord so simply. The truth is so available to them.
Yes, it ties together a couple of Maitreya's predictions. Firstly, he's talked about the voice of the people because the leadership has failed, so he's saying it's the voice of the people that will carry us forward. And he's also saying that incarnating now are the souls that are needed, that are coming with the skills and the strength that are needed for this time. And that's our young people.
And they're leading the way. They're actually leading the way politically. And if you look at Maitreya's priorities, they're leading the way with their concerns of the environment, housing, education.
Yeah, on a number of fronts. Gun control in the States has been driven by teenagers. So, yeah, there's a number of issues, global issues, being driven by young people.
Yeah. So on today's program, the three of us, we decided we'd open up the new edition of Share International magazine, the June 2019 edition. Alongside me on today's program are John. So John, what are you looking at?
Okay, well, I know that we had coffee and discussed that we'd use the latest Share International magazine, and I said, yes, that's a good idea.
And then you changed your mind?
No, mine didn't turn up, so it hasn't arrived yet.
Understood.
So I've gone to May of this year. But I'm still on topic, and I'm going to be talking about over 1 million young people go on strike for climate change. So I'm going to dovetail in after what you've just talked about.
And Peter?
Yes, I'm just going to. I've got a couple of articles here that are looking at children that are being locked up in prison, and personally, I think it's horrible, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And so we will just explore that to some extent.
So a real theme on today's program regarding the youth of the world globally. But before we move on to John, I am finding, I don't know about you two, but I am finding I'm increasingly being asked by family, friends and new acquaintances, what is this radio program Emergence News? What is it about? Ooh. I thought I'd read this out because this is the late Benjamin Krem. He answers this question quite nicely in the latest Share International magazine. He says, most people think that we humanity are at the top of the ladder of evolution because they don't see anything higher. We were talking about that earlier, Peter. Our world proceeds under the fiction that whatever you don't see doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Well, that which we think doesn't exist because it is invisible is nevertheless there in its full vitality and light, and is not only there but is also returning to visible appearance on the planet, thus Emergence News. In other words, also returning the highest, most evolved aspect of life on our planet, the spiritual kingdom, the kingdom above our kingdom, the human kingdom, is returning. In their imagination, if people think of it at all, they see the spiritual kingdom sometimes as something vague, astral, invisible, nebulous, unsolid kingdom. Or perhaps when you die, you come into contact with. In fact, it is entirely different. The spiritual kingdom is made up of the most evolved people walking on our planet. Men and women who are solid, physical, and who have the love of God in their hearts, who have the wisdom of all the ages, who have an intelligence which is razor sharp, who know the problems of humanity, who are practical and wish to help us aid humanity in the terrible problems that we are facing at this time. Not a vague, obscure thing, but solid and effective. In fact, the only truly effective kingdom on this planet, who can advise, teach and show humanity the way out of its problems. Not only does this kingdom exist, but it is now, this is the really exciting news, it is now externalizing onto the outer physical plane of everyday life. So we will all know about it.
All right, good one.
Welcome back to Emergence News. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I now hand you over to John, who's going to talk about striking action by students.
Oh yes, and it's not truancy. Hi guys, nice to see you both. So I'm looking at the Share International, and it's following along those lines that I mentioned earlier, the voice of the people. The headline is over 1 million young people go on strike for climate change, and it's a slight update, Nigel, on the numbers that you gave us earlier. In one of the largest environmental protests in history, an estimated 1.4 million young people in 123 countries, now there's 195 nations, skipped school and took to the streets on Friday the 15th of March to demand stronger action on climate change. The global protests were inspired by 16-year-old Swedish environmental activist Greta Thunberg, who began missing school on Fridays in August 2018 to protest outside the Swedish Parliament. Students around the world soon began similar protests, and now school strikes have spread. This is this wonderful, wonderful 16-year-old. We have been born into this world, and we have to live with this crisis, and our children and our grandchildren. We are facing the greatest existential crisis humanity has ever faced, and yet it's been ignored. You have ignored it. Know who you are. Scientists and academics in many countries have signed open letters giving their support to the climate strike movement. Now parents and grandparents are mobilising in support of the youth strike for climate under the banner Parents for the Future. And they've also written an open letter demanding urgent action. So the young people have started and mum and dad are following. I think that's a lovely combination. It goes on to say the global climate youth movement is doing the hardest part, standing up against the inertia of the current system to protect not only their future but ours as well. We now owe it to them to act, for hope without action is wishful thinking. So we now go back to the UK, and in a Guardian article there, Secretary General of the United Nations wrote, "These school children have grasped something that seems to elude many of the elders. We are in a race for our lives and we are losing." It's quite disturbing, actually. "The window of opportunity," he goes on to say, "is closing. We no longer have the luxury of time, and climate delay is almost as dangerous as climate denial."
Well, it's good to hear a politician recognising the urgency.
And that's the UN. And we've talked about previously how the UN
Could have a crucial role to play.
could have a crucial role.
Should
yes.
have
Should have a crucial role. Yep. He goes on to say, "I know young people can do and change the world. Many of you are anxious and fearful for the future, but I know humankind is capable of enormous achievements. Your voices give me hope. The more I see your commitment and activism, the more confident I am that we will win. Together with your help and thanks to your efforts, we can and must beat this threat and create a cleaner, safer, greener world for everybody." Greta Thunberg, now I didn't know this, was recently nominated as a candidate for this year's Nobel Peace Prize. She's come back and said, "People keep asking me, what is the solution to climate crisis? They expect me to know the answer. That is beyond absurd, as there are no solutions within our current systems."
Good point.
Doesn't it? She goes on to say,
We must change.
yes, yeah. She goes on to say we need a whole new way of thinking. The political system that you adults have created is all about competition. We need to start cooperating and sharing the remaining resources of this planet in a fair way. We are just passing on the words of the science. Our only demand is that you start listening to it and then start acting. What an amazing thing for a 16-year-old to say. And what really struck me about this quote and why I went with this article is this comment: the political system that you adults have created is all about competition. That could be from Benjamin Creme.
It's exactly what Maitreya is saying.
It's exactly what Maitreya is saying. And she goes on to say we need to start cooperating and sharing the remaining resources of this planet in a fair way. That is straight out of Esoteric Teachings, Maitreya's Emergence, Benjamin Creme. You were mentioning earlier, Nigel, that this kid must be some sort of initiate. She's just got this clear thinking, open-minded, very kind of mature take on the situation.
And what she's saying is making so much clear sense to her peers.
Yes.
They truly understand. It's resonating with them, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and she says, we children are doing this because we need to wake the adults up.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they need to do.
Yeah. 1.4 million children in 123 countries is pretty impressive. Thanks.
I see trees that are green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I hear babies cry, watch them grow, and they'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, oh, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do?
Free the Children, the pursuit to abolish child imprisonment. This is from the previous share, May Share International. And it talks about the prisons in England. Our prisons are a humanitarian disaster, and our children are being treated in a way in which is inhuman and degrading. This is Dr. David Scott. And Share International asked him, when did you begin your campaign to abolish the prison system, and what is the message? So he's not just talking about just children, but prison system in total. David Scott: I have been directly campaigning around these issues for the last 13 years. I really started to get involved with a campaign around 2006, and I became involved with a small pressure group called No More Prisons in the United Kingdom. I am currently involved with a campaign to end child imprisonment, which was launched in November 2018 at the Houses of Parliament. We campaign that children are vulnerable, that they have enormous needs, and we need to create scenarios where children can grow and develop. Children are going to make mistakes because everyone makes mistakes. The very children who have had the worst things happen to them in life, the ones who have already had a bad start, and all the difficulties, and ones who have already faced violence and abuse, harm and injury, they are the ones who seem to become sucked into the criminal system. And I mean, I think we all realise that. It's just what is actually happening. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to win a battle for hearts and minds. Crime and punishment are really deeply established ideas, and we are trying to change those ideas.
Now, those ideas, they've never really worked, have they? No. But finding this an alternative strategy, that's the key, isn't it?
That's right, it is indeed, yeah. We have an extraordinary number of child life sentences in England and Wales. There are 197 child life sentences between 2006 and 2016.
Wow.
That is a lot of children. And
on life sentences?
Yes. And in the rest of the European Union, there's only 5 children on life sentences. So England's got a lot of thinking and explaining to do.
Revising to do.
Yes.
It's very punitive.
Yeah, yes. The prison system, wow.
And in English common law, there is also a joint enterprise law. This means that a group of children get prosecuted because they know about a crime but didn't do anything to stop it. I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? Of course, you don't go ratting on your mates, do you? Or you got no mates.
Not if you want to survive,
eh?
On the mean streets of London.
I mean, that's just crazy. So they simply known a person who has perpetuated a serious offence. In the rest of the European Union, as I say, there's only 5 children. So, they need to get on board with common sense. And one would have expected Britain, UK, to be the leader, to be quite honest.
We'll have to do a program because Maitreya actually does work amongst the prisons, doesn't he?
And he's based in London.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do some research on that.
Anyway, I looked at another program in the latest Share International, and it's talking about the prisons in Israel, because I think we know that they lock up a lot of kids there. There's up to about 700, I think, children in prisons, and mostly they're in there for throwing stones at the soldiers and that sort of thing, So on the 1st of May, advocates for the Palestinian rights welcomed the reintroduction of historic legislation by Representative Betty McCollum, she's the Democrat for Minnesota, prohibiting funding for the Israeli military detention and mistreatment of Palestinian children. So this is law number HR 2407, the Promoting of Human Rights for Palestinian Children Living Under Israeli Military Occupation Act. It further solidifies the growing progressive consensus demanding real accountability for Israel's ongoing oppression of Palestinians and the violation of their rights. According to the Defence for Children International, 500 to 700 Palestinian children are detained and prosecuted in Israel's military detention system each year. These children, most of them between the ages of 12 and 17, but some as young as 9 years old, are subject to widespread, systematic, institutionalised ill treatment, including physical violence, solitary confinement and threats.
Well, unfortunately, this is going on the American-Mexican border as well.
Yes, it is. It's just, there's too many places it's happening. And anyway, this act is actually there's a law in place called the Leary Law to prohibit funding for a military detention of children in any country, including Israel. So Israel doesn't escape by being Israel. The bill also itemises specific widespread practices that Israel military have inflicted on Palestinian children, including torture, cruel or inhumane or degrading treatment, physical violence, solitary confinement, and confessions obtained by force or coercion, amongst others. Additionally, the bill authorises the appropriation of funds to monitor human rights abuses and provide physical and psychological and emotional health support and rehabilitation to these children. In the press release, this Representative McCollum stated unequivocally that Israel's system of military juvenile detention is state-sponsored child abuse designed to intimidate and terrorise Palestinian children and their families. It must be condemned.
Yeah, I can see that as a process of suppression and oppression. You're targeting the children.
Yes, that's right. I mean, what she's saying is it's outrageous that US tax dollars in the form of military aid to Israel are permitted to sustain what is clearly a gross human rights, a violation. And interestingly enough, one of the sponsors of this is a rabbi, Deputy Director Alisa Wise. A Jewish Voice for Peace said Palestinian children, like all children, should be protected and treasured. It is unconscionable that US military aid to Israel is enabling the Israel military systematic abuse of Palestinian children. So it's not just, other people pointing at Israel. It's obviously one or two enlightened voices there in Israel itself that are saying that, hey, this is not good and we need to sort it out.
And the American taxpayer needs to start taking ownership of where their tax dollars are going.
Oh, of course they do, yes. I mean, for too long they've just...
Well, they need to take ownership of their elections.
True, yeah.
Yes, but no, they certainly need to be looking at where their money's going, why are their soldiers in so many other countries bashing the poor people up or whatever. I mean, have they no compassion? I mean, what are they doing bashing up Iran, for God's sake? It's just, what have they done? People have been put upon by just about everyone on the planet. And now the US with the big stick is going on, there's smacking.
Again, threats of violence. Yeah. We live in a violent time, a violent place.
We do.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org. Scorpio Books in Christchurch carries a magazine and some books. And also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.
The opportunity to join our transmission is available Monday and Wednesday evenings and Thursday mornings, which gives us the possibility to do a service meditation in conjunction with Masters.